This is deep. You're not the voices in your head. You're the one that's hearing the voices in your head.
And there are many of them.
Oh, we call them drinking buddies up there, man. You know?
Welcome back to the Multifamily Mind podcast. My name is Steve Wunch. I'm your host, and joining me today is someone who I consider not only to be a thought leader, but someone who I consider to be a dear, dear friend, Terri Norvell. Terri specializes in transforming the chaotic landscape of business and life into a realm of high-performance teams, accelerating business profits, and peace of mind. Over the course of her 35-plus year executive leadership journey, she's held titles such as vice president, general manager, and coach. She consults and coaches at the owner or C-suite level in diverse sectors, including multifamily, development, construction, hospitality, real estate, and pharmacy. Terri is a certified business growth specialist, certified mental fitness coach, and a 7 stages of growth X-ray facilitator. She's also a co-founder of the Leadership Growth Formula, providing a science-based formula to elevate results personally, with teams, and culturally in organizations. And I'm so thrilled to have her here today. Welcome to the show, Terri.
Thank you, Steve. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you for that introduction. All that's true. So,
well, you wrote it.
I know. What a great lunch off for us, huh?
Yeah, I'd hire her.
There you go. My mind is just reeling about, I know we talked about this being organic, like, where do we want to go? Leadership is such a broad topic and impacts people personally, life leadership as well as professionally, how they show up in the workplace and lead teams.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, before we jump into that, let's just do a little backtracking, and I kind of just want you to spit out some quick details about your experience in the multifamily space, because I just want the audience to know that you are a subject matter expert in many things, multifamily being one of those.
Thank you. So I got into multifamily back in the 80s. I know that's going to date me a little bit. I answered an ad in the San Jose Mercury News newspaper.
Oh, my word.
And I know. When I read that ad, I said literally out loud, that is my job. For a regional marketing coordinator, I went through 7 interviews with the development guys. We were... where they still are, a property management development construction company. And one of our claim to fame is we built Apple's first headquarters in Cupertino on Stevens Creek Boulevard. Wow. And, it just launched from there. I was with Prometheus for 10 years and then struck out on my own consulting and, focused on the asset side of the business, right? Opening up new construction projects, doing repositioning, dispositions, and then my relocation to Colorado is so proverbial. Colorado, what do you want to do when you really grow up? And I made that transition to working on the people side of the business, and that's where my passion is. That's where my heart is. And over the course of the last number of years in the industry and practicing and perfecting leadership techniques outside of our industry so I could bring them back to property management, really dive into leadership, culture building, culture strengthening, helping teams to excel, all sorts of, I think it's the fun stuff because the people make the business happen.
They sure do.
Period.
The building is the building. The people are the key,
Yeah.
Love it. Well, that's a great story to tell. We've had a pretty long relationship with one another. I hired Terri to come speak at a couple of places where I was working in Denver. She did a leadership session with the Echelon Property Group when I was there. That was a lot of. We had a board breaking ceremony where people put their what was getting in their way. They wrote it on a board, and then we cracked the boards with our hands, which was very fun. So one of the things that really intrigues me, Terri, about your experience is the whole concept of the neuro-linguistics and how the brain works. And so I kind of want to look at this from maybe 2 different sides if we can. Let's look at it from the leadership lens and talk a little bit about, some of those things that go on in our heads when we're a leader. And then let's parlay that down to, the day-to-day boots on the ground at the properties and some of the things that are happening, the conversations that they're having with themselves. I want to say I had quite a few with myself at property level.
Yes. Yes.
But does that sound like a good place to start?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So with a leader in mind, let's talk a little bit about, I think I mentioned on our pre-call, I've seen a lot of folks in flux, a lot of leaders, a lot of high level folks, CROs, CFOs, presidents of companies, making some transitions on their own, making the decision to move on to a new adventure, or sometimes through acquisitions and dispositions, those decisions are actually made for them. And I think there's a lot of folks that are out there in the space right now who are just kind of questioning where they're at, questioning, who they are, and some of those voices that pop into their head. So let's kind of discuss that a little bit.
Let's do. And
let's talk amongst ourselves.
Okay, just amongst us. That we'll share with the world, Steve, because that's the kind of people we are.
Yes.
So I have a term for that. I call it the S-ride roller coaster of life.
Roller coaster.
S-ride, where we get on, we're doing loop-de-loops, right? And we're not in control. We're at the consequence of the environment. We're at the consequence of other people. And those loop-de-loops have us feeling stressed, struggling, stuck, all of which creates suffering. And a truth about that is I think we create our own suffering, and that suffering is indeed optional. Yeah. I've yet to find someone's birth certificate that said you will be stressed, So it doesn't have to be that way. And that's a huge aha for many people, to really come to terms with their perspective on what is being served up for them, and to not be a victim of that, to really take control back of their life, and to take back that empowerment that they do not have to be stuck. They do not have to be stressed. They do not have to suffer.
Wow. That's a magic pill that I know a lot of people would like to order a whole big bottle of.
Yeah. So it's that red pill, blue pill, right? I choose to not be on the S-ride roller coaster anymore.
Yeah. Well, so how do you kind of like self-manage or talk yourself off that ledge, knowing that, there are external factors. Wouldn't you agree though, Terri, that there are external factors that kind of create the right, it's almost like when you go to get a throat culture and they swab your throat and then they put it on the little petri dish, and then they put it in a dark cupboard, or they put it in all the right conditions so that it grows quickly so they can figure out what's wrong with you. So right. I think there's a lot of external things that create the right atmosphere for stress to be embraced.
Yeah. It's a human condition, certainly.
Yep.
Not to point fingers, not to say, I'm stuck and there's no way out. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
So the question is, how do I not default to that?
Yep.
How do I take the power back so that I know I have choices? Because we don't control the environment all the time. I love my equation, E plus R equals O. Yep. E, the event, the environment, plus how we choose to respond consciously at choice rather than react. Like you go to the doctor, and they pound your knee and your leg just goes up. No, to consciously respond. And that's the only thing we have control over to determine the outcome.
Yep. I love that.
E plus R equals O. And we always want to be playing to that outcome.
Yep.
So how do we respond when the world is showing up against us, when other people are raining on our parade, when we don't get a say necessarily?
Yep.
Still are at choice and free will. How are you choosing to see that? Mm-hmm. Because here's another little pithy one. This is a philosophy, a life philosophy, Steve. The world is showing up for me, not against me. Like like, wow, to really take that on and to live from that perspective, the world is routinely, always, it's a big word, always showing up for me and not against me. That puts me in the driver's seat. That's
Right.
huge. Like that is a flip of a switch that takes a little bit of time, I have found, and yet it's very, very possible because we don't have to be victims in our own lives.
Right.
We just don't have to. So you asked, what's the way to do that? Which is why I got so involved and certified at a master level in positive intelligence, which is all about managing your brain, managing your mind. All of my work is grounded in science. I think neuroscience is the most important frontier for us, both personally as well as professionally, because it's free. And we so often allow our minds to be like that proverbial wild stallion, just running around thinking our minds are us. Whatever chatter is going on up there is the truth.
Yep.
And God, I have to calm down here. Can you tell I'm rather passionate?
I can tell.
I am very passionate about this.
You don't have to calm down. Don't calm down. Keep going.
All right, good. Because nobody can empower you until you take control back of that wild stallion brain of ours.
Yeah.
In a way of looking at that is, you're not the voices in your head. This is deep. You're not the voices in your head. You're the one that's hearing the voices in your head.
And there are many of them.
Oh, we call them drinking buddies up there, man. And the challenge is, which one are you going to listen to? That's why when
the question is, which one's buying the drinks? That's what I want.
And it might not be the one you want to listen to.
Right.
Might not be the best influencer.
So I'm always looking at this from the lens of the multifamily, kind of hierarchy. So as a leader, I've got to start managing the conversations in my head to say, it's not my team's fault. It's not my owner's fault. It's not corporate's fault. I'm not a victim. I can choose to either go down that path and be miserable, or I can choose to look at, whatever proverbialism you want to use, like the glass half full,
right?
And find a positive way to spin things, right?
Right.
From a leasing consultant or a service tech or service manager lens, it's not the resident's fault. It's not the prospect's fault. It's not my manager's fault. I mean, sometimes they're part of the atmosphere, right? So again, that petri dish analogy where we've got to put it in the right atmosphere so that it grows. Right. They kind of create the atmosphere, but we choose how. Like if I'm going to a humid climate, I'm not going to pack a parka and my long underwear and my gloves. I'm going to pack shorts and t-shirts and sunglasses. So we kind of have to own how we enter into that environment. Does that make sense?
It does. And another way of saying that, do you control your environment? Do you allow your environment to control you, or do you take your power back and have a say in your environment?
Yep. Hi, folks. I wanted to take a quick 30-second break so that I could say, I hope you're enjoying today's episode, which couldn't be brought to you without being superpowered by Sales Mail. I mean, really, we couldn't produce this content without them. Sales Mail is the easiest and best tool for sending personalized video via email, text, and CRM. So, if you really are enjoying today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you would visit salesmail.com so you can check out how our solutions might impact your business communications. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn as well. Okay, that's enough. Now back to the conversation. And, a lot of times, I remember being on site, and sometimes it was nice to be able to say, oh, that's not my decision to make. Let me get my manager. But then we begin to look at that, given that responsibility over to somebody else doesn't really keep your power with you. It gives your power away to somebody else. And I think that happens quite a bit. We give our power away to residents all the time, because we'd rather have them be quiet and go away and be happy than to, have to deal with things that we probably should deal with anyway. But
Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah. So Steve, it comes back to just like three questions about that. Whatever situation you're finding yourself in, to take that pause, right? Some deep
Mhm.
breaths.
Mhm.
What outcome do I want in this situation? I had this conversation with someone yesterday, and it's this whole big thing that blew up. And I go, okay, what outcome do you want? Let's
Yep.
play to the outcome. What's a different way of looking at this? Because, it's that the perspective that got you there is probably not the perspective that's going to get you out of it. So what's another way of looking at it? And what action are you willing to take? So pulling yourself up and out of the dynamics or the drama, the trauma of whatever you're dealing with, play to the outcome.
Yep.
What's another way of looking at it? Perspective determines your life.
Yep.
And what actions will you take? Because everything is that response. How am I going to respond? What am I going to do different? Because that's really what it comes down to. That's that personal empowerment.
Yep. I love that. And I think Stephen Covey also talks about start with the end in mind. But what do you want the outcome to be? Because so oftentimes we're just addressing the situation, the current atmosphere, the current environment, or whatever the current issue is, right? Instead of thinking, where do I want to be with this thing ultimately? And when you finally identify what your destination is, you can start to plan your itinerary, and you can start to kind of have a little bit more control. Like, it's a lot about emotional intelligence, self-management, self-awareness, and also, relational and social awareness too. But it's interesting to think about that, because I think a lot of times we get caught up in these, and you use the term amygdala hijack all the time.
Oh, yeah.
That's that fight or flight response. And, when something goes wrong, or when there's a service failure, or, something that happens beyond our control, because we can only be worried about what we can control. But when that happens, that initial response, which is a very human response to have, right? And it's probably is it the natural response to fight or flight?
Oftentimes. So let me unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
I have a few responses for you. Of course I do.
I laugh at the unpack analogy, because typically when I travel, I overpack all the time. And whenever somebody says, let's unpack that, I always think, I need to pack a little lighter in my life.
Yeah, well, you loaded a lot into those comments.
I did. I'm sorry.
So I love emotional intelligence. I think that when Goldman brought that to market, it was pivotal in leadership. So I look at intelligence as the three-legged stool. First, there was IQ, your intellect. Then Goldman brought out EQ, your emotional. And now we have PQ, your positive quotient, your positive intelligence. And I see positive intelligence as more foundational than emotional intelligence. And I'll tell you why. Because in the world of positive intelligence, it's about taking control back of the thoughts going on in your head. Yep. And I have yet to find anyone who doesn't have that constant chatter in some form or fashion going on. Some serves us, majority of it doesn't. Yep. So those voices of the saboteur, where we hinder ourselves, they say we're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you can be happy when at some point down the road you don't got what it takes. All that self-bashing that we do hinders joy, happiness, relationships, productivity. It just sabotages so much, and yet we allow that to go on. Yeah. Because how many have been exposed to even know that that's an option, that we don't have to allow those voices? So let me add one more piece. So if what the voice is telling you in your head is not kind, loving, supportive, and encouraging, kind, loving, supportive, and encouraging, it's the voice of a saboteur.
Huh. I love the context of a saboteur versus imposter syndrome, because to me, there's a stark difference between the two. And a lot of people, I think, misinterpret the voice of the saboteur as being imposter syndrome,
Mhm.
right? Would you agree?
I do agree.
Because a saboteur, their only goal is to destroy whatever your plan is,
Mhm.
right?
Because it has you feeling unworthy, right?
Yep.
So in positive intelligence, we've identified there are 10 distinct voices that can go on in your head. The judge is the mother lode, the kingpin of these saboteurs.
Yep.
And the judges, we judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge circumstances.
Yep.
Like as if we have control over circumstances, right? So the partners, and I won't go into all of them, very common in property management would be the stickler,
Mm-hmm.
the hypervigilant, the controller, those voices that tell us things have to be a certain way, which is very property management. We're very detail, oriented. And yet there's that balance of, the saboteurs are our winning formulas from childhood that we needed them for safety. Yeah. And yet that voice is like, if you fell down at 5 and broke your arm and put a cast on, you needed that cast. Yeah. As you've moved into adulthood, you no longer need that cast on your arm. You no longer need that tough love, that kick in the butt, that those saboteurs that you think, procrastination works for me because it gives me the oomph for that drive when
I have said that to myself literally, like I'm pressure prompted and I know I am. I do really good work under pressure. So that's one of my saboteurs, which I had.
One of your saboteurs. Imagine if you didn't do that to yourself, how much more joy and relaxation you could have. It's just old stories, right? Yeah, we're running patterns. That's all we do. They're locked back here in our cerebellum. Yeah.
I had somebody call it a residual haunt.
Yes, that's new. That's new for me. I will be using that. That's exactly
the same pattern. The same thing happens all through history. It just keeps going and going, right? Interesting. Yeah.
And until you're aware, right? Everything starts with awareness that it doesn't have to be that way. Yep. If the voice isn't kind, loving, supportive, and encouraging, you don't have to listen to it. And yet there's a process, right? That awareness is just the first step. So now I want to parlay over from that little bit of context to the amygdala hijack.
Okay.
Right? Yep. So what does that, it's big fancy. People have a hard time with those words until they have it roll off their tongue enough time. Amygdala hijack. So what does that mean? So the amygdala really is 2 little almond-shaped parts of your brain, and they control your chemical cocktail. Are you releasing serotonin, oxytocin, the feel good, the love hormones? I got this. I'm in control of my day. Or is the amygdala secreting that fight or flight adrenaline, cortisol, run for your life? Because the brain knows no difference in real and pretend. It's whatever's going on in your mind. It wants to protect you. So when we say the amygdala hijack, the amygdala is secreting hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, to hijack your neocortex, your rational, your thinking, your crowning jewel of humanness, right? The ability to think and process and plan. Yeah. So when you're in fight or flight, when you're hijacked, you cannot think rationally. You cannot be at peak performance. And we've all experienced when residents come in and they unleash on us, it doesn't have anything to do with us.
Right.
They're in an amygdala hijack. They're just spewing. They're oftentimes a little out of control. Yep. And it's not going to go well, because when somebody is in that amygdala hijack, that human condition that can come on just like that, it takes a while for that chemical cocktail to dissipate out of your system. So your best course of action is to separate, send them on their way, reconvene at another time. Or if you're in that amygdala hijack, go for it.
Because if you both are,
my God, you're combustible. Yeah. Because that's what happens. One saboteur triggers the mirror neurons, right? Triggers the other saboteur. never going to end well when
Yep.
it's that situation.
I'm running through my mind resident interactions that I've had where I can see exactly what you're describing. I had a leasing consultant in South Florida. I think her name was Gina DeFrancois. So Gina, if you are listening or watching, I share this story quite often. She was at the office and a guy walked in to have a tour, and he was just being a jerk, like a total jerk. And she stopped and she said, "Is everything all right?" And he said, "What do you mean, is everything all right?" And she said, "Well, I just met you like 5 seconds ago, and all I'm feeling is like you're being mean to me, you're being negative to me, and I haven't really done anything to set the stage to deserve that." And he responded back and said, "Oh my gosh, I was on the phone with my ex-wife in the parking lot, and she gets me twisted into such a knot, and I brought that in here with me, and I'm really sorry." Talk about some big kahunas for her to go that direction.
That's right.
It can either go one way or the other.
That's right.
And luckily, and I mean, to me, that's EQ at its best. One of its examples, right?
That is a great example that she was able to go in and help him show a mirror, right? She held up a mirror. She was able to identify his emotion, the state he was by asking questions.
Yeah.
And he was big enough to own his space.
Mm-hmm. If only it was always that way, but it won't be. So we have to choose to take the high road, I guess is what we'll call it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I love the way that you can describe how the brain actually works when all that's going on, because we don't understand. I mean, it's just a natural reaction and it happens in a millisecond. It's already happened, right?
It does. Exactly right. So from the science perspective, the neocortex here is where we think rationally, where we plan, where we're able to be aware of ourselves. And that requires focus. Mm-hmm. Like the privilege of this ability is singular focus. And some things require that. When we're really on a priority deadline, when we're doing numbers, financials, we don't want to be distracted. When we're back here in our cerebellum, that's, oh my gosh, thank goodness for the cerebellum. Everything we do by habit. This is where our patterns are stored. This is where how to tie your shoe is stored, how to drive to work and wonder like, how did I even get here? And that's a good thing. And yet the emotion brain, the feeling brain, that midbrain where the amygdala is a part of that is so important. And I remember back in the 80s when I wanted to get all of our on-site managers, a day timer back in the day, the Franklin system, the Covey, all that.
Franklin Covey,
and one of our owners said, no, that should only be for work and home needs to stay at home and they can't have the crossover. I'm like, doesn't work that way.
Right.
Who we are is who shows up. Mm-hmm. And we need to realize we're human beings, not just human doings. And that emotional piece for ourselves is a gift that we need to learn to manage appropriately. And when dealing with residents, there's often that emotional charge. We're dealing with their homes. Yeah. And so, of course, there's going to be some emotionality to it.
Of course there will be. Yeah.
Which is where,
we're dealing with their homes and their money.
Yeah, to very important. And their families.
Their families, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So to really understand ourselves and know how to manage ourselves, that self-leadership, so it can carry over into professional leadership, I think is a big first step.
Yeah. It takes practice.
Oof.
And sometimes, it took me years before I was able to not get emotionally upset when somebody would come in and holler at me at the office. Even though I knew it wasn't my fault, I would still I would literally physically shake because, I love what I do and I'm here to help and I'm a pretty nice guy and I don't deserve this.
Yeah, That's right. That's right.
But it's interesting to hear how we have to really learn to manage that. And you made one comment earlier. You talked about the different parts of the brain and how one is emotional and one is logical. And I remember, I think it might have even been you that taught me this. the art of using questions is how you get people from emotion to logic, right? Because I always want people to walk away from these sessions feeling like maybe we've given them some nuggets that they can take back and plug in.
Right.
So like what Gina did with that guy, she didn't start with judgment. So the judge wasn't there. She started with curiosity. She said, is everything okay?
Right.
And that question kind of was almost like splashing him in the face with a cold glass of water.
That's right.
So
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit more? Because I'm sure it was you that shared that with me, and it was like life altering to be able to learn how to leverage questions.
It's the power of questions, open-ended question. You said the magic word, though. It's getting curious. If there's one key takeaway from this program is if you could, in the morning when you wake up, put on your curiosity hat and seek to understand. And the other word that goes with curiosity is empathy. And to really come from empathy, which is seeking to be curious and understand and, what could possibly be going on with that person, and having the courage, the vulnerability, quite frankly, to ask those open-ended questions without judgment. I know there's an Indian philosopher that says the highest form of human intelligence is to ask questions without judgment. If we can let go of judgment. And wow, that's multiple years of practice to get out from under an approach, because we judge ourselves, we judge others, and we judge circumstances. Social media, that's a sea of judgment going on there. So to be able to step out and to really go through the day and view things objectively, like any two people would have the same observation, like your dirty shoes and socks are in the middle of the room.
Right.
No judgment.
What you're doing though is you're saying the facts. So you're focused on the facts. And I used to use the analogy. Do you remember? So this talk about dating ourselves. Remember Dragnet?
Oh, that is truly a dating ourselves.
Well, it was reruns for both of us. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
But like the detective would knock at the door and the lady would answer and he'd say like, well, tell me what happened. And she's like, oh my God, it was so terrible. And it was dark and I was so scared. And he's like, ma'am, just the facts. And what that does is it shuts down emotion so that you're not focused on how you're feeling. You're focused on what you see, what you can prove, what actually happened, which I think that's a key element too. It is. And then the other thing that I was thinking of is like a manager, a site manager gets frustrated with team performance. Like maybe somebody is late to work and they've been late to work every day this week. And so I'm going to put them on a PIP. A PIP is not a PIP is a coaching tool. It's not a tool for termination, first of all, right? But like if you took that situation and you put it through that lens of curiosity.
Yes.
Hey, Terri, you've been late every day this week. What's going on? It changes the dynamic, and it changes the dynamic. And if you took that same approach to every interaction. So again, here's events plus R reaction equals outcome. I mean, every event that happens, if you took that approach of curiosity and started asking questions, I think it would calm the storm a little bit.
That's right. I totally agree with that. Questions they're the hero in management and leadership and for our lives. Change the question, change the outcome. We have so much control, if you will, by how we respond versus react to determine the outcome.
Love it.
So we say play to the outcome, and you don't control the outcome. And yet by how you respond, you do have a big say
yeah, you do.
in what that outcome could be.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw another one here, Steve, because this is one of my favorite hot topics.
Okay.
And it goes along with this, passionate detachment. And if people can learn to live passionately with empathy, with curiosity, and know that how they show up, how they interact with their passion has a lot to do with it, and yet be detached from how they think it should be, what the outcome should be, life gets so much better. Passionate detachment.
I love
It's
it.
a very high level leadership ability, and one that is worthy of practice. It's a unique pairing of words.
Yeah. Is this something that you teach in the leadership growth formula?
It is.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because there might be some folks in the audience that would perchance have an interest, and we'll make sure that we in our session description and comments, and when we put this out into the world, we'll make sure that people know how to connect with you and how to find out more about the growth leadership factor. But share a little bit about what those sessions are like, and so forth.
Okay, sure. We actually serve it up in three different ways. And upcoming, we have in Denver here in April, I'm not certain when this will release, we do one live leadership growth formula program of our flagship in Colorado a year. And then we have another one coming up in September in Fort Lauderdale. Why, you might ask? Because I live in Denver and my partner Kelly lives in West Palm Beach. So,
and hopefully you're smart enough to plan for the Fort Lauderdale sessions when the weather is crappy and cold in Denver.
Yes, and around all those activities that go on the beach down there.
Yeah.
But that leadership growth formula is a 2.5 day program that we teach leadership skills. It is absolutely for personal leadership development as well as professional, how to elevate your team, how to elevate your culture. There's nothing like it on the market. It's a culmination of what Kelly and I have gleaned over our 35 plus careers, I guess 70 years, as to what makes the greatest difference in people. And it works. So I offer invitations. Our website is really straightforward, leadershipgrowthformula.com. So our live programs is one way to gain more information. And then we also go on site. And when we go on site and work with teams, we do our core leadership, those essential qualities that people just aren't even aware that they don't know. They're not aware of what they don't know.
Yeah, they don't know what they don't know.
They don't. So that can either be a 1 day or a 2 day that really aligns a team and elevates a team. We have one success story that's just huge. We went out and worked with a team, 25 people. And within 6 months, 80% of the people, they were on such a growth trajectory, were promoted into some sort of management.
80%? Wow. Because
it elevated the belief in themselves that they could step up into that role. And it's just like, wow, they're just on fire. Their growth, their trajectory was just so straight up. So we do on-sites, and then soon to be released in about a month, we have an online, on-demand core essentials of leadership. It's a 5-course program, a masterclass.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
25 minutes each. So it's like the snackable version. Yep. And we do a certification afterwards. And so you'll be seeing more about that as we're in beta right now with a couple locations. And we just couldn't be more excited because we can't go live everywhere, right?
Right. Good for you. I'm so pleased to hear that. That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah.
And again, folks, we'll make sure that you know how to connect with those opportunities and resources for sure. Well, before I wrap things, we have usually one question that we ask each guest that appears on our show. And hopefully I told you about it before you got here.
Well, you probably did. And at this moment, it's going to be a mystery.
Well, just keep your amygdala in check, young lady.
Okay.
Okay. So the question is, we use a word here at the Multifamily Mind called, the word is audacious.
Ooh.
And we define audacious as extremely bold, daring, fearless, like a fearless explorer. So I'm going to climb that mountain no matter how high, no matter how rough the weather is. I'm going to spelunk that cave because it needs to be spelunked and I have the passion and desire to do it. So, and you're kind of, I'm interested to hear what you say because, most of my guests are multifamily operators. So you've been kind of out of that vernacular for a while. What is your most audacious take on multifamily at the moment?
Wow, it's so dynamic. There's so much change going on. AI is such an impact, the consolidation, the automation. I mean, it's kind of a crazy time in our industry with so much change. I'm going to go back to what we were talking about, Steve, because even though the environment is changing so much, it's the people, it's each of us and how we show up. And what we've just been talking about here today empowers people that no matter what's going on, you got within you the ability, if you choose to take it, to surf, to navigate, to ride the wave, to get control of what's going on in your mind. It's funny. As I see my hands, I see my aura ring. And the reason I got this is that I run in such a fast pace that I wanted to slow down. Steve, my aura ring said, even though I was in a meditation, I was in stress. I'm like, there's something wrong with that picture because, it's just like, okay, that's the human condition. We just amp ourselves up. So on a daily basis, what can we each do to calm ourselves, to not allow that amygdala hijack to overtake us? It might be when you wake up in the morning, take 5 minutes to breathe. Meditation might be too big of a word. So just do there's so many types of breathing. When you go to bed, decompress for the day. Yeah. As you go through the day, get out of your head, get into your body, breathe routinely, consciously think, how do you want to respond? Get curious. Listen to this recording a few times. Yeah. We've given so many nuggets for personal growth and how to navigate more successfully in what can be a stressful environment. Yeah. And yet, remember, stress is optional.
Right. Well, and as you were talking at the end there, I'm thinking, first thing I do in the morning, it's right by my bed, and it's the first thing I look at, and I shouldn't. I don't use the word meditation, Terri. I think it's going to be my word for the year. It's just mindfulness. Yeah. And awareness, mindful of how I'm spending my time, being mindful of where I'm allowing my thoughts to take me, being mindful of, quit playing your games and turn off the TV 10, 15 minutes before you go to bed so that your mind can kind of unwind and be at a more restful place, which I think pairs nicely with what you just shared. So that's awesome.
It does. So let me build on that just a little bit, Steve, because I'm a big advocate on people taking on one word of the year. So with mindfulness, I would say print that out, post it different places. When you go to the grocery store, how can you live mindfully? When you're driving in traffic, how can you live mindfully? That you really allow that to permeate through you, because that is such a great orientation for this year.
And it kind of determines your reaction. Mm-hmm. The more mindful you are, the more you're going to kind of know what's going on, know what your destination is, and you're going to be able to react in a way that's going to either get you there with less stress or get you there more peacefully, or however that works.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So yeah, great word of the year. My word of this year is lighthearted. So
lighthearted.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Because I have a tendency to get going and I can be pretty darn serious and pretty, driven. And I just, want to show up more playfully. I want to show up more lighthearted in pretty much everything I do. I wore a very lighthearted little shirt today.
I did too.
You did.
I usually wear black when I do these, but I've decided it's Terri. I'm going to just wear something
Really? That's so funny. Last night when I was thinking about what do I want to wear, I thought, oh, I'll wear a black turtleneck and just be all Steve Jobs-like. And it's like, oh, I'm going to be lighthearted.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Well, I have so enjoyed our time together, Terri. I know that our listeners have probably taken away several nuggets. I loved your suggestion about, revisiting this podcast maybe a couple more times, play it on, 1.25 or 1.5 speed and just let it play while you're doing your work. That's a great way to kind of continue to marinate in the things that we've discussed here today. But I appreciate so much your time. I know you're busy, so thank you for making some time for us. This has been the Multifamily Mind. I'm Steve Wunch. We look forward to having you join us on our next episode. And just remember, this is super powered by Sales Mail. Cheers, everybody. Have a great one. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Multifamily Mind podcast, brought to you by Sales Mail, the easiest way to send personalized video via email, text, and CRM. To learn more, go to salesmail.com. And remember, always be audacious. Until next time, I'm Steve Wunch. Have a great week.